Well, good morning, everyone. This is the first of another attempt to try to pastor and love you guys as well as I can when we can't meet together. I know all of you are spending a lot more time at home, like pretty much everyone else in the world right now, and that's probably driving you crazy. I also know that you guys are grieving the loss of the rest of the school year, even if you don't know it. Because you see, when you have plans in your mind about how the rest of that year is going to go and what you think is going to happen, and then someone cancels those plans on you, it's a sudden loss. And it affects us more than we realize, more than we'd like to admit. Because you see, it's a loss of a future that you thought you were going to have, at least for the next couple of months. And then it replaces that future with the uncertainty and the complete mix-up of your life and your normal routine. You all are having to do school at home now, which, yeah, for some of you is what you've always been doing. But even if that is the case, you're doing it with a lot more people around now than you're used to. You're not able to see your friends as much as you might like, if at all. You're probably getting pretty annoyed at your siblings and your parents because you're spending a lot more time around them. And by the way, I bet you are annoying them too. So keep it in perspective. You're not able to do the things that you used to do, at least not in the ways that you used to do them. So this loss is throwing your whole life out of whack. And I want to start doing a daily Devo with you guys to try to talk about that. These are not going to be long. They're going to be maybe 4 to 6 minutes or so. But I think in these minutes, we can learn something about what God is doing, at least in general. I guess if you watched my video on Habakkuk that I released on Sunday night, you know that God is doing a work that we would not believe. And I firmly believe that he is doing that in each of you, personally, not just in the world in general, but in you guys, personally, a work that we wouldn't believe. And again, since you are grieving a loss, even if you don't know it, we're going to look at a Bible story that is very familiar to all of you, but has a lot to say about loss and God's work in it. We're going to start studying the story of Joseph, Jacob, Judah, and Jesus in Genesis 37 to the end of the book. Now, you all were raised in the church, so this is a familiar story to you, but hopefully we can look at it from this perspective and get some fresh insight on our lives right now. I'm not sure how long we're going to be in it because, well, you all know that I am prone to go slow through things. But I figure we'll probably cover about a chapter or maybe a little bit more a week. But we're going to start out slow this morning, just looking at the first 2 verses. Those are really easy to skip over, but they actually set the stage for the rest of the story. In fact, what they do is they set up the conflict and some of the characters of this story. Because, you know, when we read Bible stories, we need to read them like we would any other story, which means they have characters, plot lines, conflict, resolution, all the things that normal stories have. In fact, they're some of the best stories in the world, the best stories ever written, not just because they're written really well, or that they are written really well, but because they're true, but because they're the stories of our history. So you see, these first 2 verses set up the conflict and begin introducing the characters of this story. You see, we tend to think of this story as being about Joseph, which is true, just like all of us tend to think of our stories in our lives as being about us, which is not untrue, but they're also about a lot more. This is about Joseph, yes, but it's also about Jacob, Judah, and Jesus. Those are the main characters of this story. Well, almost. There's one other main character who's on every page of the story, even though he's not named very often, and that's God himself. So let's look at the first 2 verses. Jacob lived in the land of his father's sojournings, in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob, Joseph being 17 years old. All right, we're going to just stop right there. You see, Jacob is one of the main characters of this story, even though he doesn't seem to come into it a lot and play a big role. The story is about the generations of Jacob, his family. See, back in 27 to 36, we got some of Jacob's personal story. But then here we see how the story plays itself out. You see, earlier on, God had given the same promises to Jacob as he had given to Abraham. God promised Jacob to use him and his family to bring the Messiah, to bring Jesus into the world, who would be a blessing to the whole world. So this story is about the ancestors of Jesus, Jacob's family. That's why he's one of the main characters. In fact, this also sets up the conflict of the story. You guys all know that a famine is coming, which means everyone on the eastern half of the Mediterranean could die. In this story, everyone's life is about to be thrown out of whack because of famine, just like our lives have been thrown out of whack because of disease. But in this story, God is doing something bigger through Jacob's family than just protecting the people who might die from famine. You see, he's protecting the very line of Jesus Christ himself, the generations of Jacob. He's doing a much bigger work than Jacob or Joseph will ever realize. Their lives are thrown out of whack because God is doing something bigger than they'd ever understand if they were told. He's bringing Jesus Christ, the Savior, into the world. Right now, your lives are thrown out of whack. And it's okay to lament that and to grieve that. It is okay to do that. But hold on to this truth. God is doing something bigger and greater than your life. Bigger than we could ever understand. Hang on to that truth because it puts your loss in the context of the bigger story where God is doing something huge. We don't know what that is yet. But the thing about these Bible stories that are similar to ours is that we learn more about God, his character, how he works, and how we can trust him as we go through these stories. And then we can learn to trust him in our story. So, I'll see you guys again tomorrow morning.